and welcome to a spoiler review episode for the Book of Boba Fett from the
Geek
Buddies!
Yay! Well, as you noticed here, we do not have our fourth member, Shannon McClung. He is out from work obligations, so the three of us will be talking about episode 4 or chapter 4 of the Book of Boba Fett, The Gathering Storm here. We're going to have some fun breaking this down, and this is spoiler review, so if you haven't seen the episode, go and watch it. Come on back and join us, but let's introduce ourselves in the meantime. I am the Outlaw John Rocha, writer, producer, and host here on the Geek Buddies and the Outlaw Nation. Mike?
I am Michael Vogel. I'm a writer and producer of animated TV shows and movies.
And joining us again every week, as she has for the Book of Boba Fett reviews, she's the co-host of Force Toast Pod and the co-host of the Jedi Way. Laura Kelly, how are you? How are you feeling?
I'm amazing. I'm excited to talk about this one. I'm wearing my Mandalorian shirt for no reason. No reason at all.
No reason at all.
Music cues unite. Yeah, we're going to get into all of that. But first, give a real quick shout out to the people that sponsor and power what we do on the Outlaw Nation and what we do here specifically on the Geek Buddies. Carbon Health. Carbon Health has been an incredible sponsor, and we're into our third month of them sponsoring us. So thank you to them very, very much. They are a company that believes that everyone deserves good health care. Go to carbonhealth.com. Get taken a look at. They do virtual care. They do in-person care. There are clinics in a number of states here across the country. And if you're trying to get tested for COVID and the Omicron thing is going crazy in certain states, you should get tested. Or if you're trying to go overseas, they're now offering that kind of testing for you overall. So go to carbonhealth.com and see if there's a place there that can help you. And certainly a number of people in this episode could have benefited from having a Carbon Health around, specifically a rat catcher that gets choked by a certain Boba Fett for sure. Wouldn't you say there, Mike?
I would. Listen, Tatooine is not a safe place. So, I would recommend Carbon Health kind of expanding their reach to the Outer Rim if possible, because I'm going to go out on a limb and say Mos Espa does not have the best healthcare.
No, for a number of reasons. Yeah. All right. So we're going to break this whole thing down, get into it section by section and do it spoiler wise. So last spoiler warning before we get into it. Michael, let's start with as we like to talk about here. This is an overall thought. What was your overall thoughts here after you watched episode 4 of the Book of Boba Fett?
My overall thoughts are that 4 episodes into Book of Boba Fett, I'm starting to be a little concerned about where we are going. I don't dislike anything per se, but I also feel like I don't really feel like there's a lot of momentum. Like, I know where we're going. I'm getting hints of what's happening. I kind of can see where things are headed, but I kind of feel like the story is not gripping me. And I'm a hardcore Star Wars guy. I've talked to a lot of friends who are big Mandalorian fans, not huge Star Wars people, but really like Mandalorian. And they've expressed trouble getting into Book of Boba as much. And at first I kind of thought it was, as Laura and you and Shannon and I discussed in the past few weeks, this whole idea that people had preconceived notions of Boba Fett and that maybe those expectations weren't being met. But I don't really think that's what it is. I think that it's more like, maybe it's a pacing thing. Maybe it's something with the way that they're building this arc for Boba. I don't dislike anything that's happening. It's kind of like last week where I didn't dislike the biker gang. Right. I just maybe had issues with the execution. And I kind of feel like with Book of Boba all around, Boba crawling out of the Sarlacc pit, hanging with the Tuskens, having a change of heart, wanting to take over things, all makes sense to me. It's all great. I think execution-wise, it's not really feeling like it's landing at this point for me. So I'm curious to see where we're going to go in the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, Laura, I mean, we're past the halfway point. This is a 7-episode series. We just crossed the halfway point here with this episode directed by Kevin Tenchoron, even though IMDb had it listed as Bryce Dallas Howard. Now it's Kevin Tenchoron. She's doing next week's episode. This one again from Jon Favreau and staff writer Noah Clore. But is Michael right? Do you sense that too, Laura? Are you sensing like, what's the motivation here? Where are we getting to? Are 3 episodes going to be enough to satisfy us if we're starting to feel a little stagnation here?
I think in terms of the motivation, I'm sort of in that same boat too, because, the question's been raised in this episode of like, so no more bounty hunting. Well, what's next? Well, this, I guess. It's like, apparently there's no other option. It's just bounty hunting or having your own house, which is fine. They're two perfectly valid options. But yeah, the motivating factor there, I'm still questioning a little bit too. So I wonder if maybe we'll dig into a little bit more of that. But that said, yeah, we're into episode 4. Like I feel like we should have been pushing the story forward a little bit more at this point, but I don't know. Like maybe they are like hell bent on like, we're getting to season 2 and that's when we're going to get into shit. But for right now, I'm not head over heels in love with the show, but I don't think it's bad. I'm enjoying it being back in the sandbox of Star Wars, but and I also don't think it deserves as much criticism as it's getting, I don't think. But for the most part, I overall am just kind of happy to be back in Star Wars, and I'm grateful we have something. This isn't my favorite thing I've ever gotten, but I still think it's good.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with Laura. Like, I see a lot of criticism on social media that I don't necessarily think is fully warranted, because I do think it's a good show, and I think they're doing a nice job, and I think they've introduced a lot of really, really cool things into the world of it all. I think Laura kind of landed on something, which is, when you're building out your character arc for a season, you build out what your character wants. Like your character has to want something really badly. And so far with Boba, it's been mostly what he doesn't want. Like, I don't want to be a bounty hunter anymore. And having a main character that doesn't want something, we know that he's going to take over organized crime. We know that's what he's trying to do. But one conversation around a fire pit where he just says, the Tuskens showed me that you need a tribe. I don't want to be a bounty hunter anymore. I'm going to take over all organized crime. It's kind of a giant leap that I don't know is fully feels like it's fleshed out. And I think that's where people are like, so what is Boba doing? What does he want? Like, we understand what he's doing, but it doesn't feel like he really, really needs it yet.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, overall, I will say this. I like this episode more than last week's episode. I think we got back to the vibe of what I enjoyed about this. And certainly we now, as we suspected, saw the him coming up on Fennec Shan and him, helping Fennec Shan. So we got that story as we were leading to. So maybe the flashbacks now are going to be a lesser part of the show as we go into these last 3 episodes, and more about what's happening in the city, more what's happening in Mos Espa now starts to become the more central part of what we're going forward with in Boba Fett. We shall see. But let's get into it now. We start out back in the back of the tank. Boba's riding a bantha across the desert. We go back into his memories here. He comes upon Jabba's palace. He sees the Nikto riders outside, the Gamorrean guards, and others walking around outside its gates. He tells the bantha, "Not today, old girl. Too many guards," and heads off to go get something to eat. It's nighttime. We see him eating, and he's feeding his bantha like a small pet, which is really cute. Suddenly, he sees a flare, and we hear that Mandalorian music. I haven't had a feeling like this since I've heard the Black Panther music in the MCU movies. As soon as you hear it, you're like, oh, who's showing up? So you hear the Mandalorian music. Boba rides off, and he finds Fennec Shan in the sand. Certainly a connection to what happened in the first season of The Mandalorian. He's got Fennec Shan with him now, riding on the bantha, heads off to a local town. Then we head off to this kind of, I don't know what this place is. It's a mod parlor, I guess.
Mod shop, yeah.
A mod shop. Yes, these other members of the cybernetic bike gang, kind of like we saw, or other people with cybernetic enhancements within them, carries Fennec Shan into this mod parlor or mod shop in Mos Eisley, where some version of space EDM or house music is playing. We see a doctor performing some form of cybernetic surgery. The doctor initially refuses him and says no walk-ins, but Boba offers a stack of money or a bag of money, and he goes to work on Fennec Shan immediately to a montage and heals her. But why does he save her? What's the motivation here? So let's stop here as a first stopping point. Mike, thoughts about this opening Fennec Shan? We get to see the mod shop. We get to see that this cybernetic thing is not anything they're walking away from. This is going to be a prevalent part of the Boba Fett show going forward now in these last few episodes. So what did you think about this and hearing him kind of navigating or reconning Jabba's palace?
I mean, I think, like, right off the bat, you kind of get to what I'm kind of feeling about the episode, which is everything makes sense. Like, doesn't have the Tuskens anymore, time to get back to business, goes to where his ship is, realizes he can't get in there. But I think that, Boba Fett, and again, maybe this is expectations that I have growing up, loving Boba Fett or whatever, but it would be more interesting to see him try to get his ship and realize there's too many people and he can't do it, and give us a little bit of an action scene. But let's show Boba being Boba, even despite the fact that he doesn't have his armor, and see it's too much for him, as opposed to him just kind of looking and being like, I'm out. Not good for me. So, I mean, I think a lot of that's kind of my overall feeling with a lot of the choices in the show, which is they're just sort of telling us something, but not showing us. And I would have preferred that, but we get it. The ship is there. We see that this is where we are. We know that we're caught up to everything. I do kind of love the fact that between his new baby Rancor and this Bantha and a couple other, like, Boba Fett's an animal lover.
Yeah.
New information about Boba Fett. He loves his animals, and who doesn't love a clone that loves his animals? Like, that's really it's a heartwarming tale in a galaxy far, far away. I did love, like, as soon as the flare went up,
Coming this
Christmas. It's like Marley and Me, except it's like, I don't know what the Bantha's name is. Makuka and Me. Like, I don't know, what do you call the Bantha?
Makuka it is.
Makuka. But then seeing the flare go up was really cool because if you remember in Mandalorian season 1, Din Djarin blinded Fennec with a flare, and that is what we are seeing. So it is like in addition to the music cue, which was great, it's always great, and Marvel, like you said, does this really well, is when two different shows or two different universes collide, and this was when we're like, oh shit, we're caught up. And we see him walk up to Fennec, we see get her, then they go to the mod shop, and watching the whole mod shop sequence again, it kind of harkened back to me the way I felt a week ago when we were talking about the biker gang, which is, I actually have no issue with this idea of like sort of cybernetic modifications being a part of the Star Wars universe. Right. I mean, original Star Wars is about a Jedi that got put into a machine and became Darth Vader. Luke Skywalker lost his hand and got a cybernetic hand. So the idea of cybernetic modifications on humans makes 1000% sense in the world of Star Wars. And the idea that 5 years post Return of the Jedi, younger kids are just doing modifications just to enhance themselves, not because they need to, totally is valid and makes sense. Like, I love the idea. I love the idea of mod shops. I love the idea of all of it. But my only issue is this mod shop, given the costumes, some of the colors, the music and everything, it didn't feel like a mod shop on Tatooine. Fair. It felt more like a mod shop that maybe you would find on Coruscant. And I think that it's the same issue I had with the bikes last week, which is a bunch of kids on Tatooine souping up their bikes and making them look super badass. Totally makes sense. Right. But when you are art directing a show, or when you're art directing a universe where each planet has sort of an inherent color scheme, an inherent palette, an inherent feel, inherent rules to it, there's a big difference between what a droid or a speeder bike or a mod shop looks like on Tatooine or Coruscant or Naboo or anywhere. Like, there's like, these worlds are distinctive to us because of the art direction that the Lucasfilm team does. And I just feel like with the mod shop, I love the idea of it. I think it's all super cool. I think art direction wise, it feels a little out of place, and that's what's really throwing people, including the bikers last week.
All right, fair enough. Oh, good. Yeah.
But besides my complaint, I thought the whole sequence with Fennec was super cool. I loved that they used a lot of practical effects. They didn't CG it all up. Like, it really felt like old Star Wars. And I thought that was super cool. And that was a good bit of information. Like, I don't think that we fully, or maybe I missed it, but I don't think we fully realized how cybernetic Fennec actually was at this point. Like, I think that's new information that I thought was really, really interesting. Yeah,
Lauren, let me throw something, and obviously get your thoughts on this opening sequence, but also, I mean, he does this without Fennec's approval, without Fennec's, like, Fennec has no agency here. Without consent, he decides to adjust her body. Maybe she was fine dying without this stuff inside of her. I don't know. But what did you think about this decision to make it seem like it was Boba's decision to save her, which seems kind of a male thing, a male approach? I'm just going to save her regardless of whether she wants me to or not. Like, what did you think about all this?
He's flying in like the White Knight in shining armor, but except he's in a black robe on Tatooine. But he, I really didn't give that much thought about how she, she didn't really consent to becoming part robot. And that's, I guess there's definitely some sort of philosophical question there that I almost wonder, we've been talking this whole time about, like, is Fennec going to potentially betray Boba at some point? And it's like, is that maybe the starting point? Just like, you did this to me and I didn't ask you to. Like, you should have just left me there. Right. We'll see if that conversation comes to play. I don't think it will, but it's something that could potentially come down the road. Who knows? Mm-hmm.
Well, what'd you think about this opening here with the flares and the mod shop and everything? Does it feel out of place for you overall? Did you like the way this went down?
The mod shop I didn't mind, and I kind of think that I've been conditioned as we've been going in this show to sort of see Tatooine in a different light, and I'm sort of enjoying that, being along for that ride. Tatooine's never been my favorite go-to planet. I was not excited about the prospect of seeing this show set entirely on a desert planet, not going anywhere else. But I'm really enjoying it. I love that the color that they're adding to Tatooine at this point. But I think that, you know, they've been doing that very gradually throughout the show, sometimes more aggressively than others. But I'm kind of enjoying it, actually, and I thought it just fit fine, but that's just my opinion. I'm in the same boat where I'm enjoying a lot of the practical effects that we're getting in this, particularly the animals that we're getting in the show. That bantha was certainly a really good looking puppet. At one point, you know, when we saw the Rancor, same thing. I like that they're bringing that component into it. The fact that she wags her tail and she burps. These are fun details that I like adding to goofy Star Wars. So I appreciate little things like that. Getting the call back to Mandalorian season 1, episode 5 with those flash charges. That was really fun to see that. I did not remember anything about that. I went back and had to go watch that whole sequence to be like, was that a ship falling down from the sky? No, the flash charges that they used to blind her scope as they were rushing towards her. That was a cool effect, and just nice that they tied it in so smoothly, I think, to this show. One thing in the mod shop I thought was really funny was, aren't you a little old to be here? Like, that line. I'm like, oh, sick burn. So that was just an interesting little insight into Tatooine, that this is like, I don't know, the equivalent of like a tattoo parlor, but it's really aimed at young people specifically for some reason. Like, it's just an interesting detail. It's more insight into this culture of Tatooine that we haven't seen much of in the films.
And again, this is what I like about
the first section. We're taking a lot of time on. You know, we're limited time, so as long as there's a lot more sections to come. All right.
I just wanted to add, like, what I do like about the whole mod idea is that it is like the younger people that are doing it. Like, I love this idea that it's a newer thing in the Star Wars universe that younger people are modifying themselves using cybernetic parts, using droid parts, and that the older generation might be like, what are the kids doing today? Like, I think doing something like that and making that a generational thing is actually kind of fun.
Yeah, it's almost meta. I mean, because look, Robert Rodriguez and Jon Favreau aren't exactly not long in the tooth, so it's a little bit of meta, maybe taking shots at themselves a little bit. All right, let's see. Fennec comes to there in the sand with Boba. She asks what he did to her. He explains and offers her a black melon. Boba knows her. Boba knows her as master assassin Fennec Shan of the Mid-Rim. They discuss her bounty, but Boba doesn't want it. He tells her who he is and explains the Tuskens versus Bikers situation, which she says could not have happened. He asks for her help in recovering the Firespray gunship. This is now officially the name of this gunship. The Slave One will not be uttered. Temuera Morrison said that in an interview as well. So this is the name, which caused a lot of tongues wagging on social media. It's in Jabba's palace, and she says if she helps him, then her debt is paid. Cut to them riding on the bantha to Jabba's palace. Fennec is surveying the entrance with the guards. They're unsure of how many guards there are, so Fennec uses a mini probe. It looks like that probe droid that was used on Leia in the first Star Wars movie. Boba bids goodbye to his bantha, tells Fennec he's going to get his ship and his armor, says he wants to hit Agatra or the bloated person who betrayed him. Fennec says people like us don't get to decide when we can leave this profession, so they're having this discussion about what he wants to do next, and she says people like us don't get to decide when we leave this profession. The droid returns with this info. There's too many guards, but Fennec comes up with a plan to get in there quietly. They break through the bars into the sewer type area under the palace. We cut to a kitchen where there's some fun sequence with some droids cooking food and a rat catcher droid. Boba and Fennec come through the gate. They eventually catch this rat catcher droid and shut him off. They take off and come upon his ship. Two Gamorrean guards show up and they take them out. And I said, by the way, isn't this in the technological future? Isn't there a security system with cameras? Anyway, more guards come. Fennec holds them off as Boba goes into the Firespray to see if he can still fly. Fennec is holding them off as Boba gets the ship moving. Fennec boards the ship, and then eventually Fennec fights off more guards on the ship, gets a shot in to open the gate, and out goes the Firespray from Jabba's palace. So, Laura, I go to you on this one. Conversations about her coming to and getting the machination. She's now alive, but then conversations about a debt, then conversations about what she's going to do next with her life, him kind of pitching the idea of not wanting to be a bounty hunter anymore, and them working together to release the Firespray. So what do you think about this whole section of the show here?
I think from what we've seen of Fennec Shand so far in other Star Wars media, I was sort of surprised like how easily she kind of acquiesced to this. I mean, he's like, I was left for dead on the sands of Tatooine like you, and she's just like, all right, we have that in common, so I'm on board. And that it just seemed a little bit fast. Again, we have 7 episodes to get all of this in, so I get that some things are going to feel a little bit rushed inevitably. There was one thing about this section and this episode in particular that I really liked, which is that it finally answered the question I've had from the beginning, which is she like tied to him against her will and working for him against her will, or is she there because she wants to be? And we knew that he saved her and that he got her, saved her basically from dying on the sands. But it wasn't clear to me whether or not she was really there of her own free will. And I'm glad that they established that finally. I think it's kind of strange they waited until episode 4 to do it, but beyond the point, the conversation of him, talking about, I don't want to work for these idiots who are going to get me killed. Like that's just, which is fair. But he talks about how the Tuskens took me in, made me part of their tribe, and I was going to leave hunting behind. So it sounds like this has been brewing now for like 5 years. He's been thinking about this, of wanting to leave hunting. So that part of it didn't feel as rushed to me. I don't think that whole part of it lines up. But again, because it's a big galaxy, you have lots of options of things you could go do. Being head of a crime family is apparently the way he wanted to go. One other point I want to hit on this, the animation of this LEP, this rabbit droid that's in the kitchen is really interesting. I didn't figure out what to compare it to. Like the animation style almost looked a little bit like not stop motion, but like a little bit of that in there.
Laura, you're young. Harryhausen is what we referenced in the first episode. This felt kind of droid Harryhausen in its approach. So I think that's possibly where they're getting that influence from. Clash of the Titans, the original one with Harry Hamlin, that had that same kind of vibe to some of their look as well.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it was just an interesting choice that they've chosen to like hone in on that style specifically for this show. I don't hate it. It's just interesting. Yeah. This whole scene though, with the rabbit droid, the entire time I'm watching it, Boba's like chasing him around the kitchen. It's a little buffoony. He finally catches it and it kind of whines and its ears drop, and you can very much see like we're going for sad here. All I could think the entire time this scene was happening is like, oh, the fanboys are gonna hate this so much. I can hear it now. I can see the tweets. They're not gonna like it. I don't mind it. I thought it was kind of funny and kind of cute, but I was fully prepared to see a lot of hate towards it in this scene in particular. One last thing I want to hit, that when we're actually finally getting out of the hangar with the Firespray, there's that one very cool shot of the doors almost closing and Fennec's little smirk right before they close. And I went back and watched it like multiple times. I was just like, that's so good. It's so good. It's perfect.
There's some great cinematography and framed shots in this episode for sure. I don't know this director at all, but like seeing his work in this, I thought he did a really good job with Tatooine. Real quick, Laura, before we move on to Michael, thoughts on Firespray versus Slave One? We're done with that.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with it. I kind of think Firespray is just a cooler name. I mean, from everything that I've known from trivia, and I don't know how long it's been like this, but the Slave One was always a Firespray 31 class something ship. So maybe at some point that wasn't the case, but it's always been that for as long as I've known it. So it's not really a hard transition for me. Like I think it might be for some people who've been collecting these figures for their whole life. So that's fine.
Fair enough. Michael, Hollywood, the holiday special, antics in the kitchen. What are we thinking about this whole sequence? Conversations about what to do with the life of a bounty hunter, and then the Firespray situation. Thoughts on this section?
Well, first on the Firespray. I mean, I also am like, I get it, but like, I think I'd have more of an issue if it was ever actually called Slave One in the movies, but I don't think it ever was.
I don't think so. It was either.
Yeah. I think it's just, and I get it. It's the name on the toy. It's in other versions of non-canonical stuff in the comics, like we've referred to it as that. So I get that it's a change. Technically, just to be clear, Firespray is also the type of ship the Slave One always was. It was always a Firespray 31 class patrol and attack craft.
There it is.
So there's the chance that he was just referring to it as like, you know, it would be like Han saying, "Hey, go get that Corellian freighter." It probably isn't that. It probably is that this is a Firespray ship, and we're just gonna call it the Firespray, and that's how we're gonna. But it's not like they just pulled a name out of their ass and just replaced it. They are calling it what the ship has always been, and they're just getting rid of that name, which. I understand why people are upset. I also don't really care. Like, it's like in the big scheme of things, that's like a small potatoes. I guess if they changed the name of like the Millennium Falcon, I'd have more of like, hey, that's the Falcon. But the Slave One, I'm kind of like, I'm all right to let that go, and it doesn't bug me too much. Yeah. That bugged me the least out of some of these other things that we're about to talk about. I do think so. I'm just really curious to see what else we get with Boba and Fennec. Like, I do think that this scene, I think again, everything is just kind of easy.
Yes.
You know, Boba goes to Jabba's palace and says, too many guards. And then, oh, good, there's an assassin that just got killed. Let me use her to get into Jabba's palace now. And then and then Fennec wakes up and she's like, what'd you do? And he's like, oh, I saved you on Boba Fett. And she's like, you're dead. He's like, I'm not dead. She's like, what are you going to do? He's like, I don't want to be a bounty hunter anymore. I'm going to do this. And she's like, cool, I'm in. Like, to Laura's point, it feels like it was just like, okay. And I get the whole, like, I don't want the money on your bounty. I'm not going to turn you in. I'd rather you just help me and then we're square. Like, it all makes sense. Again, anyone who's going to ding me for this, everything that happens in this episode makes perfect logical sense. But there's not a push and pull. There's not Fennec being like, okay, I'll help you. And he's like, oh, we're going into Jabba's palace. And she's like, fuck you, I'm not doing Jabba's palace. That's I'd rather you turn me in. I'd rather you turn me in than like mess with those guys. Like, it's all just a little bit too easy. I did think her little surveillance thing was super cool. Like, that felt like very classic Star Wars to me. Like, the cool little device going in there. That was super neat. Just going around Jabba's palace and getting a sense of sort of the geography of it, which, as much as I have loved Jabba's palace since I was a kid, I don't know that I ever fully thought about the geography of it. So I thought that was all super cool. So the kitchen, I love the kitchen sequence except for one thing. Like, I thought it was great to see EV-929. He's one of my favorite old school Jedi droids. Mr. You're a feisty little one. We'll put you on Jabba's sail barge. I'm glad to see that he's also helping out in the kitchen. Like, it's nice to see him just hanging out around the palace. And then I love the other droid. I looked it up. He is a COO cook droid. Who is basically like the chef version of General Grievous with his arms. Like, I was like, okay, cool. But I like them. Like, I think, again, kind of to my art direction point about the mod shop, like, these droids felt like they belonged on Tatooine. Right. Like, these felt like old, beat up, lived in droids. And even the Ratcatcher that came out, which is kind of more from the Clone Wars animated series, still, it felt like that fit in there. And sort of the humor and the silliness of Star Wars with those droids was great. Boba running around like he's trying to catch his puppy, less great to me. And again, it's not that I need Boba to be a straight badass who just always gets the shot and just kills everybody. And is like, I love this idea that he loves animals. I love that there's a sensitive side to Boba. But you're telling me that the guy, bounty hunter that was known throughout the core worlds, the mid-rim and the outer rim, for his amazing bounty hunter skills, even out of his armor, can't catch that Ratcatcher droid or deal with it? I'm like, So it's one of those things where it's like, I'm always down for comedy in Star Wars. I'm always down for the lighter, more kid-friendly side of Star Wars. I think it's completely appropriate and a part of the universe. But it's always like a fine line of like, who do you do it with? Who's to Laura's point, who's the buffoon? Who's the silly one? And like, there's certain characters that you can watch do that and it's great. But with Boba, they keep going against type week after week after week in so many ways. And at a certain point, you're like, well, then who is he really?
He did get knocked into the Sarlacc pit by a blind guy. I'll just point that out, though, real quick.
I did. Somebody on Twitter did point that out. They did post that video. They're like, I love that y'all are complaining about the guy that went down like this. And then they showed the video, and I'm like, touche. But even to that point, it's like, Boba Fett has had a as popular as he is, he's had an interesting past. You know, starting in the holiday special, then becoming a badass in Empire Strikes Back, and going down like a chump in Return of the Jedi. And if you get rid of all the non-canonical stuff anymore, that's pretty much what we know, aside from seeing him as a kid in Clone Wars. Right. But even as a kid in Clone Wars, he was kind of a badass. Like they always made a point to be like, this dude's a badass. And so I think even if you're adding new colors to him, I'm super okay with him being sillier in some ways, Boba Fett having a sense of humor. Like I said, Boba Fett loving animals. But I feel like we just haven't seen quite enough of
the other side,
the other side of it.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you, man. And the kitchen chase scene was, I didn't mind the kitchen stuff. I didn't mind the George. It's the chase scene. That's where I was like, oh, come on, stop it. This is not the character you do this with. And again, for those people who don't understand nuance, it's about how you do it, not the fact that it's in the show. I see so many people, some people in my sphere, fellow critics, who are like, oh, people are just mad because there's comedy. Comedy's been in Star Wars. And yes, but it's how you effing do it is the difference. And I didn't like the way they do this here. And I also agree, Mike, you make excellent points. Things are happening way too damn easily. The thing that's enjoyable about Star Wars, or about any franchise really, is conflict and the conversation within the conflict and resistance to something, and how you kind of navigate that, and how certain instances, certain situations lead to a person changing their mind or going along with you. And although we do get that here in the next section, which we'll get to, I think how we get here is so easy that there's no real drama, there's no real conflict, there's no real concern here. And this is the issue with this thing only being 7 episodes long. If we had a couple of Fennec Shan flashback episodes or back to tank episodes, whatever, where we're going back in Fennec Shan's past and we're seeing her and what she's navigated, what she's dealt with, the near escapes. I mean, the Cad Bane stuff in Bad Batch is a great example of the near escape and how many times she came close to death and how exhausting this is for her. Then one look at Boba in the interaction between them by the fire can carry so much more weight that makes you understand why she says yes, or why she considers this proposal a little more easily than maybe she would have if you didn't have the background of that. So I think that's where the show kind of is undercutting these two incredibly badass people and not giving us enough depth to Fennec. Because even in this, which was Fennec-centric, we don't really get Fennec being the lead dog in the situation.
No, and I think, it's a really good point you make. And I think that in all of this stuff, it's like, it's just, it all happens so easily. Yeah. And there's no added, okay, you almost got out, but then this is the thing. Like, you could have easily had Fennec drop down and say that she was betraying Boba. And Boba, and then we in the audience and everybody be like, oh, fuck this, she's gonna betray him. And then she does, that's a trick, and she uses that to help them get out or something. Like, there's different ways that you could add conflict or add surprise and still do exactly what you do. And I think they did a really good job of having a really fun, dynamic escape sequence. Like, so I think, again, everything was cool. Her blowing up the Gonk droid, great. Like, everything was really fun. But it's just like, if there's that added extra bit of character stuff for these two characters that we now know have been around together for a while, and we really don't want to see, hey, you want to hang out with me? Sure.
Right.
We want to see a push and pull. I mean, think of like Han and Leia in Empire Strikes Back being the ultimate version of this. Like, we all love Han and Leia, not because we got to Empire Strikes Back and they were like, I love you. I love you too. We love them because they argued for the entire fucking movie. And so a little bit of that with Fennec and Boba, I think, would have gone a long way.
Just like Luke and Anakin, right? He's trying to turn him the whole time during that original trilogy. It doesn't until the absolute end that he finally does it. But what keeps us watching is, will he or won't he? And the fact that this happened so quickly here is kind of frustrating. And same thing with the biker gang last episode. I mean, they just joined up. And, these people, you would assume, have lived a hard scrabble life and don't trust people easily. But here they are just going to join up with Boba. So just kind of a little bit of a pattern of easiness in this show that's a bit uncomfortable. All right, let's move on to the next section here. Fennec says next time they stick to the plan because Boba went off on his own a little bit there in some of his decisions, and says that she is sticking around. Boba says her debt is paid and asks where she wants to be dropped off because it's got scores to settle. Fennec says she's along for the ride. We cut to the Nikto biker gang riding in the desert. I almost wanted some kind of music here that was like, dono, 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 dono. And then Boba absolutely wipes them out, which is an awesome sequence. Just an awesome sequence with the Firespray, tearing them up to pieces as revenge for what happened to the Tusken Raiders. He comes upon the Sarlacc pit looking for his armor. This surprised me. that he would go back to this, but it's a great shot of Boba descending over the Sarlacc pit. He turns on the light, seeing the pit. It's pretty awesome to see inside of it. Suddenly it reaches up to capture them. Boba tries to shoot them out, but the hold of the Sarlacc is too strong, and it's Fennec once again who has to save his ass, drops a bomb into it that we'd seen before in other Star Wars, and that ends up killing it. And I said, let that be a lesson, kids. When you leave a bad situation, don't go back to it. Boba makes a joke about Fennec touching his buttons. He climbs back down into it, tries to find his armor, but it isn't there. She tries to bring the philosophy here and say the armor served its purpose, and you no longer need that. You need a bacta tank. And then Fennec and Boba are talking at night again. She asks if he's serious about forming his own house. Boba lays out the logic, how much money would have been saved, lives saved. He's tired of dying at the idiocy of others, which is what Laura mentioned earlier. He says he can cut her in on the money to protect her. She says the Tuskens have made him soft. We cut to Boba in the bacta tank, having flashes of him killing Bib Fortuna, taking the throne, turns off the bacta tank, the droids dress him again and tell him he's completely healed. And then Fennec comes in and tell him that the Major Domo is singing like a canary and that the mods are combing the town. Let's stop there. So much here with him with the fire spray, him shooting them up here, Michael, and then the stuff with the Sarlacc pit, and then eventually Fennec and him kind of coming together and working together to become a team here. So thoughts on this at this point in the show?
Yeah, I thought him taking out the Nito biker gang was great. Like, that was a super awesome shot. It looked good. Him coming up, like, finally cutting loose on them, like, felt good. Really liked it. Mm-hmm. The Sarlacc pit thing, I'm a little bit torn on because, and a lot of people have mentioned this on Twitter, so I saw it, but, like, he knows he crawled out of the Sarlacc pit in his armor.
Right.
Like, and I completely buy the fact. I completely buy the fact that he doesn't really remember. I am sure that's a very traumatic moment. I think you could be very confused, but I think that if that's the route you're going to take, you need to say, I remember being in the Sarlacc and I woke up and I don't really remember how I got out of it, which also would be a little bit weird, but like, he crawled out of the Sarlacc in his armor, so I don't know if he felt like he woke up and the Sarlacc had like undressed him. Like, I don't know what he's thinking, but that being said, visually, that was awesome. Yeah. It looked amazing. Like the Slave One sort of hovering over and them looking in and getting closer and looking around in there. It was super cool. And then to use that sonic charge from the prequel movies that they used it in season 2 of Mandalorian and everybody lost their goddamn minds because it's such a distinctive sound and it's such a cool bomb. And to have that be the thing that blows up the Sarlacc pit and the way you just saw the sonic charge go out underneath the sand, like that was almost worth the fact that I was kind of scratching my head about, does he not remember what the armor is? And again, like, you know, him and Fennec sort of coming together. Again, I accept it all. I know that they're coming together. I think that they established how they came together. Yeah. I just feel like I feel like with a little bit more conflict between them and a little bit more push and pull, we would have gotten to know more about both Boba and Fennec, which is, I think, what we're all sort of craving. And
ironic, Michael, they make him vulnerable in certain ways and not vulnerable in other ways, and the other ways would have helped with the conflict more between them. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, but you're absolutely. And then I did just love, like, once we're like, now that we're caught up on flashbacks, there's no flashbacks left, so you're healed.
Yes, you're healed.
The bacta tank. The bacta plot device is done because we have caught up. So you're good, which I did kind of enjoy.
Laura, thoughts on this section? We mentioned the conversations you touched on earlier about like what he wants to do, building this house, how he wants to cut her in, all of this stuff, the stuff with the Sarlacc pit and everything there. So what do you think about, and then her deciding that she is staying along for the ride now because of their work, I guess, together in Jabba's palace, getting the fire spray out of there.
Exactly. I love this scene where, you know, he looks over at her and he's like, oh, next time. So you're not leaving. Interesting. And maybe I was looking for it, especially on like my rewatches, but this from here on out for the rest of this episode, I really feel like I was starting to see parts of their relationship coming together that I was really enjoying.
Yeah.
No, there wasn't a lot of conflict or back and forth, but like just these like little smiles that Fennec kind of gives him, or like the little moments where they like look at each other. I like those moments, and I think that that was kind of fun. And I like the idea that we've got these two characters who have like lived this ruthless, isolated existence, working for idiots, each of them nearly getting killed by some buffoon in the desert who had no business getting the jump on them. It happened to both of them, and then they're both left dead. The fact that he then saves her, she gets to like save him when we get to this part with the Sarlacc pit. I think the fact that she's the one who gets that seismic charge down there and kills the Sarlacc, like she saved him from his last monster from the past. So I think that there was a really kind of beautiful sort of, I don't know, parallel to their relationship here that I'm picking up on more as I go back and rewatch these things.
I do think, though, I mean, because, like any character that we watch in a live action setting, there's two pieces to it. There's what's written on the page, and then there's what the actors are bringing to it. And I think what you're hitting on, which I 1000% agree with, is these two have good chemistry and they're good actors.
Yes.
Like Ming-Na, like she's taking what she's given as Fennec Shan, and she is doing the Lord's work. Like she is going to give you subtleties to this character, whether they exist or not. And like, I think that's sort of what's saving the whole thing. You make a really good point, which is what I'm craving. Cause like, if you really think about this logically, Fennec wakes up and Boba's sitting there and she's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I'm Boba Fett." And she's like, "All right." He's like, "I need your help going into Jabba's palace." Well, he wouldn't have gotten into Jabba's palace without her.
Yeah.
He can't catch the rat catcher. He barely gets his ship out without her help. Then he almost falls into a Sarlacc pit, and she's the one who has to save his ass. And then she's like, "You know what? You've got the stuff. I'm sticking with you." And I'm like, "Are you though? Really?" I would love, like, to your point, I would love it if he, I want a world where he was like, "Yeah, you're a master assassin, but it looks like the couple people got the drop on you." And she's like, "Didn't you get knocked into a sail barge and fall into this?" Like them giving each other a little bit of shit, and kind of sizing each other up, and then her being like, and giving him just one badass thing, and having her be like, "Okay, I got you." So I think they're both doing a good job. I like her. I like him. I like them together. I'm on board for it. But I do feel like if this is the origin story of this relationship, I feel like they missed some beats that would have really made it shine.
Yeah, I think you're both 100% correct on that. A little more of the ball busting, a little more of the taking the piss. I mean, they're equal assassins. A little more of the taking the piss out of each other would have allowed us to kind of sink deeper into this relationship, kind of like sinking into a soft couch. You're like, okay, cool. I'm good to go. I'm settled in. Let's see what more we got with these two. I'm looking forward as we go into these next 3 episodes, what their interactions are going to be like. And she comes off as an equal. That's my biggest argument about this show, is that they're doing Fennec Shan a bit of a disservice. They spent all this time building her up, seeing her in these separate situations. She was pretty kick-ass in The Mandalorian, kick-ass in The Bad Batch, and what have you. And then she comes to this, and we're not seeing the kick. Yes, she's saving his ass, but it's not the kick-ass way of doing it. We'd like to see more with her kind of taking the lead, taking the initiative, doing these things. And we're not seeing enough of that, aside from one sequence where she was jumping all over the buildings and caught those assassins of the Night Wind or what have you. Other than that, we haven't really seen much. And it's almost like taking this convention where, what do they call it? I guess it's a weird, like where it's like the woman is certainly capable of leading the situation, kind of like what you had with Sabine and Ezra. Sabine is way more qualified to lead stuff before Ezra's ever qualified. Mara and Aqua. Mara's more qualified than Aquaman is. There's just to drag him to figure things out. In a way, they're kind of turning the cliche in a different way, but it's not working because she's still in service of him. She's still, in essence, making sure he's the lead dog by saving his ass consistently in these situations. And it's like, because if she wasn't there, Boba is back in that Sarlacc pit for the rest of his damn life, probably, because he doesn't have the armor. He would have been sucked into that acid, and that's that, So I think it's just a little frustrating how they're not fully letting her stand on her own 2 feet, be her own character, and be her own power, and be as equal as Boba, for me, at least. I don't know. All right, let's see. Move on here. Boba wants to show his face, but in town, but again, of course. But Fennec thinks it's a bad idea because war could break out at any moment. We cut to the sanctuary where Krssantan. Speaking of someone who's underused in this show, we cut to the sanctuary where Krssantan is angrily watching some Trandoshans winning money. This is some serious stuff that's been going on between these two species for quite some time. He approaches them and kicks the crap out of them as Boba walks in. Garza Whip comes up, stops him as he's choking the last Trandoshan there, says he's made his point, and then completely lays flowers verbally at his feet, talking about his time in the gladiator pit, and says the times has passed and they're living in a different time and that he is above it. And just for a second, we think Krssantan might be listening here, and then rips off the arm of the Trandoshan as she's telling him, you have a big bard tab and she'll wipe this dead off the books if he doesn't dismember a Trandoshan. Well, he does it anyway. Drops some coins in a Twi'lek's hand. Boba says it's worth a shot, walks out, pitches Krssantan to join him and offers him a job. No response one way or the other. Then we cut to Jabba's palace. There's a dinner gathering here with Fennec telling the history of the throne, that since Jabba was on it. She's talking to all these captains who left when Bib Fortuna became the leader. She's pitching them, captains of their families, I mean. She's pitching them to join Boba so they can accrue their riches again. Boba tells them of the Pike Syndicate preparing for war and that he needs their help to stop him. When they threaten to kill him and asks what stops them from doing so, the baby Rancor makes an appearance right below them. A couple of heads of the family point out that that the Pikes are only challenging Boba's territory. Boba says it's fine. I will fight these battles alone, but asks them to stay neutral if the Pikes approach to betray him. They discuss it amongst themselves. They say yes. We cut to them all leaving. Fennec asks if he trusts them. He says his deal is better than anything the Pikes are offering. Says they need to prepare for war. She asks how many credits they have. They have plenty. She says you can get muscle if you know where to look. And we hear the Mandalorian theme music for the second time in this show, basically hinting that Din Djarin is coming here soon. All right, Laura, thoughts on this? And that's the end of the episode. So thoughts on this, Laura, here as we talk about Black Krssantan, the Trandoshans, Garza Whip getting one scene in this whole situation, Boba pitching him to join, and then this conversation with the head of these 5 families that have been out of favor in Bib Fortuna's reign and now could be in favor financially under Boba. What do you think about all this?
Well, I was very excited to see Black Krssantan back. In this scene in particular, I thought worked so well for the evolution of how he eventually becomes Boba's ally, which we knew he would. The arm ripping off scene was great. I also was kind of like, he's not going to do it. He's not going to do it. And like the fact that he does it, and then Garza just sighs, and it's just a really funny scene. The fact that she's, the hit it Max line is maybe one of my favorite lines in Star Wars. It was just perfect. And I enjoyed getting like that monologue from her character. I kind of thought that she was going to be like a bigger part of this show than she has been so far, but getting that whole long scene with her, I really enjoyed that. So I'm hoping that we continue to get more of her as the show goes on. In terms of the the alien that is asking, what prevents this group of people from killing you and just taking what we want from your throne, and the Rancor then chooses that moment to pop. It's just perfect. I mean, do we think like the Rancor trainer was down there and he was just like, that's our cue, like go. We've got Danny Trejo somewhere.
Danny Trejo's just waiting down there. He's like, this is it. Let's do it, man.
That's the cue.
And it was perfect. But yeah, saying that, Boba tells them like cooperation is going to make them all rich. Like we can join up and have a really good defense here, and the Pikes will just like fuck off and it'll be great. And he in that speech tells them that he calls Tatooine their planet. He says our planet. And that was just one thing that sort of struck me as really interesting. The fact that we saw this character grow up on Kamino, and now he has like claimed Tatooine as like his home planet. And I really like, we're kind of skirting that theme of like found family that is so prevalent in Star Wars. And so I like that they're sort of, slowly bringing that into the fold in the show. And I imagine as we gain more allies in the show as it goes on, we'll start to feel even more of that, which I like. It's a great, thing about Star Wars that I enjoy when it pops up and things like this.
Din Djarin coming or not? Is Din Djarin coming or not?
Oh, for sure. I think so. But, it's interesting that they had that tie-in with episode 5 in season 1 in this episode. And then we know Dave Filoni's going to be directing. He directed that episode 5 of season 1.
True.
We heard the Mandalorian cue. I don't know. I'm like, that feels too obvious for them to be like misleading us. Cause like now we all want it. And if you don't if you don't do it, like now you've got a bunch of people who are kind of already a little bit disappointed with the show, now being really disappointed that you didn't bring Din Djarin in. So I really hope for their sake that they actually go through with that.
Fair enough. Mike, thoughts on this? The head of the five families wasn't quite the Godfather scene that people thought. These are excommunicated five heads of the families coming back to get communicated possibly back into Boba's reign. And then, of course, the other stuff. What do you think of this whole ending to the show here?
Well, I don't know that they're excommunicated. I think that I think it's the Aqualish, the Trandoshans, and the Klatooinians. I believe that are the three groups of aliens. And I think that they're not excommunicated. They're all still running their territory. Like, they're all still running their territory.
Yeah, but they're not in favor, right? I mean, it seemed like they weren't making as much money as they were under Jabba with Bib Fortuna.
Maybe, but that Trandoshan was really clear. He's like, we make lots of money from spice. And you're like, okay, cool, I get it. Like, you guys sell those drugs. So I don't think they're excommunicated, and I think their point is the Pikes are just going after Boba's territory. They're still making money, and as long as the Pikes are like doing whatever, selling the spice and doing whatever, I think they're still getting whatever money they're getting. Maybe it's not as good as it was under Jabba, but they're still doing okay, which is why they're kind of like, why would we help you? Like, if they were straight up excommunicated and weren't making anything, then I think they'd be more likely to just instantly join up with Boba and be like, yeah, then we'll help you and like, let's take Tatooine back. But I think they're kind of like, the Pikes could take you out and we'll still do business with them. So I think that's where they're at. I do think the whole sanctuary scene was maybe my favorite scene. I loved everything about it. I did have a lot of people asking. There was a lot of non-Star Wars people that were confused as to why Black Krssantan was so mad at the Trandoshans. And I was like, look, the first Trandoshan we saw in this show showed up with a Wookiee pelt for Boba Fett. Yeah. Like, it's pretty. These two don't get along.
This goes back centuries, yeah.
But I do think that like Garth Whip, I thought was great. I thought it was so cool to see her sort of talk him down, to see how she kind of rolls in the sanctuary, how she kind of runs business. And to Laura's point, I thought when he did finally just rip off that Trandoshan's arm, which will grow back because he's a Trandoshan, but when he finally did rip off that arm, her just sort of like, all right, fuck it, I tried, like, was just perfect. Like, I do hope we see more of her. I do think Sanctuary works really great. It's again, just to get back to that whole art direction discussion, Sanctuary is way nicer than anything we've ever seen on Tatooine before, but it feels like it fits in Tatooine more to me. Like, it feels like it totally belongs. Hit It Max was perfect. So, like, all of that was really great. And, like, yeah, Black Krssantan, like, I just want to see more of him. He's just a straight badass. So I really hope that we get some more, not just seeing him fight and be a badass, but some more quiet moments too, because I think he's like a really, like, of all of the Wookiee additions we've had post Chewbacca, including the holiday special, he's probably the coolest Wookiee we've gotten aside from Chewie. I mean, he's a Wookiee I'm really down to see more happen with.
Although you're not reading the High Republic book, which Laura would probably counter here in just a second.
I would include Buryaga, but we haven't seen him on screen, so that's
I am reading the High Republic books, and Buryaga is right up there, but I haven't seen him. I just read about him. But yes, the badass Wookiee, the badass yet sensitive Wookiee Jedi of 100 years prior to the prequels is a very cool Wookiee indeed. But yeah, so I thought the whole meeting was good. Again, just could have used more. Could have used more conflict. Could have used more debate. Could have used more Boba Fett being like, I'm fucking Boba Fett, y'all. So I just think that there's just a little bit of everything. It feels like they're holding back for some reason, and you just want to see more, and you want to see more, and it just feels like they're constantly keeping Boba in reserve for some reason, and maybe they're gonna bring it all together. I will say, look, when we all watched Mandalorian season 1, like, we all love Mandalorian. We enjoyed season 1. We love season 2. But about this point of Mandalorian, where you got the Bryce Dallas Howard, like, attack in the small fishing village episode, followed by the prison break episode, and everyone was like, where is this show going? It just feels like it's a bunch of standalone things, and Din Djarin is just hopping around with Grogu, and I don't know what's happening. And then you got to those last 2 episodes where they brought everything together, and it just was perfection. So they could still pull this off. Like, we could still say, okay, it kind of felt like it was meandering a little bit. They were holding Boba in reserve. We didn't really get to see Fennec be badass. And these next 3 episodes, they could just, like, wipe the floor with us, and we'll be like, oh, that's why they did it the way they did it. So I'm still enjoying it. I'm curious to see where it goes, but I definitely, each episode, except for the second episode, I'm always left like a little bit wanting more.
Yeah, my only concern is that I don't understand why Bo would be like, well, if you're not going to help me, could you just not help them? Is that cool? Could you just not? That seemed like not, although I get it by the political side of things, it might have, I don't know, might have made sense and been logical, but it wasn't an active choice. And I think, that's the thing that kind of bothered me a little bit. I would like Boba to have been a little more like, don't you understand what can happen here? Just think about a little bit more than just like, hey, just don't turn on me. Just don't betray me, which of course is, like, the second they've survived by betraying who they need to betray in order to stay alive, in order to keep their entire family alive and thriving as much as possible. So no agreement over wine with a guy like Boba, who just got to the job like a week ago, is going to make that much of a difference to them. So it seemed like a weird choice to put in writing wise, I guess I would say. Overall, I just felt like there should have been something a little more active. I would have liked something a little more active, especially if you're going to threaten with a baby Rancor. Something a little more active would have been good for me. My thoughts are overall on that. So, all right, well, that's the end of this episode. We're going to jump into episode 5, obviously, next week and see what we're going to get. Is Din Djarin coming next week or the week after? We don't know. This is called the Gathering Storm, so the storm hasn't gathered quite yet. So maybe
it's gathering.
It's gathering, exactly. So maybe there's a little more in episode 5, and then we get Din Djarin coming in episode 6 and 7, possibly for the finale with Black Krssantan and everybody else that Patton Oswalt has talked about probably showing up. So we shall see. Laura Kelly, thanks so much for joining us yet again for an awesome spoiler review episode. Please let people know where they can find you.
Sure, come find me on Twitter at @shutup_Laura. And John and I host a show, Jedi Way, right here on his YouTube channel. I host a show with my friend Alice called The Force Toast Pod. You can find that on all major podcast platforms.
What's the most recent episode? What are you guys talking about? Is it coming up or did it just happen? Your Force
it came out and we talked about episodes 2 and 3 of Mandalorian, or I'm sorry, of Boba Fett for the most part. The next episode we're planning to talk about the Fallen Star and the High Republic, and I'm very much looking forward to that.
That's right. That's good stuff. Mikey, what do we have to tell him?
Look, if you would like to continue listening to us talk about a bunch of nerdy stuff, here is how you can help us make that happen. You can hit the like button below, like button. Subscribe to Johnny's Outlaw Nation page over here and check out all the awesome content he has, including the Jedi Way with Laura. Leave your comments below. Like, a lot of opinions in this episode. Like, do you agree? Do you disagree? Are you loving Boba? Are you feeling a little left wanting? What do you think about some of this stuff? Where do you think it's going to go? Like, how is this stacking up for you against all the other Star Wars content that's out there? We actually really want to know what you guys think. We love hearing back from you guys on all of that. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere where podcasts are available, leave us some stars, leave us some comments. It helps us go up in the rankings so other people can find us. And as always, the best thing that you guys can do is retweet this video, post it on your socials, and tell everybody that if they want all the geek news that is fit to print, this is the place to find it here at the Geek Buddies.
And by fit to print, he means fit to print online. Nobody buys papers anymore. You can
fit to print on your hearts.
Oh, good. Well done. Well done. Follow Michael at MKToon. And of course, right above Laura and Michael's head, you see our Instagram and our Twitter handles for you to follow us there as well. Follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter and on Instagram and TikTok. I'm starting to walk into that quagmire and see what's there as well. God help us all.
TikTok's never going to be the same.
Nope. I'm going to do a peacemaker dance every day. All of that happening. And please, as Michael said, let people know about what we're doing here and have some fun with us as well as we come back next week for another brand new spoiler review episode from the Book of Boba Fett here from the
Geek
Buddies.
Hey!